What if I told you that the United States could be just days away from grinding to a halt, not because of a natural disaster, not because of some outside enemy, but because of a decision made in the halls of power in Washington, D.C., a decision that Senator J.D. Vance has already sounded the alarm on by declaring flat out, we're headed to a shutdown, right after former President Donald Trump met with leaders on Capitol Hill. And the timing of this warning has set off shockwaves because it raises a terrifying possibility that this isn't just posturing, it isn't just political theater, but rather a real countdown to a government shutdown that could shake the country from top to bottom, leaving millions of Americans suddenly uncertain about paychecks, benefits, and the stability of the nation's economy. And the big question now is, how did we get here? Why did Vance say it with such certainty? And what exactly was discussed in that private meeting between Trump and the Hill? Leaders that seems to have triggered this alarm. Because if you know the history of shutdowns, you know they are not small inconveniences. They are national crises that ripple into every corner of American life, from air travel to military pay to Social Security checks. And this time the stakes are even higher because the divisions in Washington are sharper than ever. The pressure from both party bases is reaching a boiling point. And the next few days could decide whether the government keeps running or whether the doors literally close. Picture this. Federal workers standing outside shuttered buildings, markets tumbling as investors lose faith, families suddenly unsure if assistance will arrive on time, and all of this hanging on the fragile negotiations between lawmakers who seem more interested in power struggles and compromise. So when Vance steps forward and says we're headed toward a shutdown, people listen. Because he's not just any senator, he's someone closely aligned with Trump, someone who has the ear of the Republican base, and his words carry weight. They echo like a warning shot in a tense standoff, and the drama is compounded by Trump's role because his meeting with Hill leaders wasn't just a casual conversation. It was a show of influence, a reminder that even out of office, his presence dominates a Republican strategy, and while the current president and his administration push for stability, for keeping the government open, they face the reality that the opposition is unified around hard lines, demands, and ultimatums that make compromise almost impossible, and the public is caught in the middle, watching the countdown clock tick toward a shutdown that would mean frozen pay for service members, stalled infrastructure projects, closed national parks, delayed passports, and even risks to the broader global economy. Because when America stumbles, the entire world feels a shock. So the suspense builds, the tension rises, and everyone is asking, is this a bluff? Or is this the real thing? And as cameras flash outside the Capitol, as reporters shout questions into the wind, inside those rooms the negotiations are intense, filled with raised voices, shifting alliances, and the ever-present shadow of political calculation. Because for some, a shutdown is leverage. It's a way to force the other side to the table. But for others, it's a catastrophe, a sign of dysfunction that weakens America's credibility both at home and abroad. And you can almost feel the drama playing out like a high-stakes movie. Act 1 was a meeting, Act 2 is a warning from Vance, and now we're in Act 3, where the entire nation is bracing to see what happens next, and the unanswered questions hang heavy in the air. What exactly did Trump tell those Hill leaders? Why was Vance so confident in his grim prediction? And most importantly, who is willing to take the political risk of letting the government shut down? Because make no mistake, every lawmaker knows the public will point fingers, blame will fall, and careers could be made or destroyed in the fallout. Yet despite that risk, the momentum seems to be pushing toward confrontation rather than resolution, with both sides unwilling to back down, rhetoric hardening, and deadlines closing in fast. And if you think about the timing, it makes the situation even more volatile, because in an election cycle every move is amplified, every decision weaponized, and a shutdown could become the central narrative of the political season, giving one side ammunition to accuse the other of recklessness or incompetence or betrayal of the people. And it's not just the politicians who are on edge, it's the American public, ordinary families who've been through enough uncertainty in recent years and now face the prospect of losing the basic stability they depend on from a government. And as we watch this story unfold, you can't help but wonder, is a shutdown inevitable, or is it a negotiating tactic meant to scare the other side into concessions? Because Washington has seen this play before, but rarely with stakes this high, rarely with a tension this sharp, rarely with so much riding on the outcome, and every hour that passes brings us closer to a tipping point, a moment where words become reality, where Vance's prediction is tested against the unfolding truth, and while cameras capture the smiles, the handshakes, The confident speech is outside, behind closed doors. The fear is real, the frustration is boiling, and the choices being made could decide the path of a nation for months to come. And that's why people across the country, from Wall Street to small towns, are glued to the news, waiting, hoping, dreading, because the line between functioning government and shutdown chaos has never felt thinner. And as Vance's words echo, we're headed to a shutdown. They are no longer just a warning. They are a drumbeat in the background of a country holding its breath, waiting to see if the leaders they elected will choose compromise or collision, waiting to see if the system holds or breaks, and knowing deep down that either way, the impact will be felt by every single American, from the richest CEO to the struggling single parent, from the soldier deployed overseas to the retiree living on a fixed income. And now, as the hours slip away and the drama intensifies, the world is left with one burning question that has yet to be answered. And that burning question is not just whispered in Washington corridors or analyzed by political commentators on late-night shows. It is being felt in households where parents are quietly wondering how they will explain to their kids why their paychecks may not arrive on time, in small businesses wondering if government contracts will suddenly freeze, in airports where workers know delays and shortages could worsen if federal funding halts. And yet at the center of it all, the faces on the Hill continue their public rituals of negotiation, shaking hands in front of cameras while exchanging sharp words behind closed doors, a dual performance of diplomacy and confrontation. And Vance's statement still hangs in the air like a prophecy, because when a senator closely aligned with the opposition's strongest figure says with certainty that a shutdown is coming, it's not just a prediction, it's a signal of strategy. And the ripple effect is enormous, fueling speculation about whether this crisis is being engineered deliberately to strengthen bargaining power or whether it is the inevitable result of irreconcilable demands. And this is where the stakes begin to sharpen even more, because the current president faces a responsibility of keeping the machinery of government running while knowing that every concession risks angering his own supporters, while the opposition, emboldened by Trump's presence and influence, pushes harder, framing the looming shutdown not as failure but as a necessary confrontation. And this tension between duty and defiance is a core of the drama, a tug-of-war that grows more dangerous with every passing hour as markets show signs of unease, as credit agencies whisper about potential downgrades, as allies abroad quietly ask whether America is stable enough to lead in this moment. And inside Washington, the drama becomes almost cinematic, with private phone calls late into the night, aides rushing between offices with draft proposals, furious whispers in Capitol hallways, and all the while, reporters circling like hawks, desperate for leaks, for clues, for the faintest indication of who is winning and who is losing. But the truth is that in a shutdown, nobody truly wins, and yet the logic of politics often runs contrary to logic itself. And so the question becomes, how far are leaders willing to push? How much are they willing to risk? And is there a red line that anyone, will refuse to cross? Or is the momentum now so strong that the crash is unavoidable? And when you listen closely to the tone of conversations, you realize that beneath the speeches and sound bites, there's fear, not just of political fallout, but of genuine chaos. Because history has shown that shutdowns are unpredictable once they begin to take on a life of their own, stretching on for days or even weeks, dragging millions into uncertainty. And the longer they last, the harder they are to end. And so Vance's words echo again, not as a one-time warning, but as a drumbeat, growing louder as each side digs deeper, and the image becomes one of two trains hurtling toward each other on the same track, neither side willing to pull the brake, convinced that the other will swerve first. But what if nobody swerves? What if the collision is inevitable? What if that is a real plan all along, to let the crash happen and then point to the wreckage as proof of failure? And if that is true, then this is no longer just about budgets or policy. It is about power, pure and raw, a struggle for control of the national narrative, a test of endurance where the public is both the audience and collateral damage. And in this battle, Trump's shadow looms large, his meeting with Hill leaders replayed in speculation again and again, because nobody knows exactly what promises or threats were made in that room, what strategies were whispered, but everyone knows that his influence cannot be ignored, and the very uncertainty of his role adds to the tension, leaving observers wondering if he is pulling the strings behind the scenes, if his allies are setting the stage for a shutdown as a deliberate show of strength, or if the divisions are simply too deep for any resolution, regardless of who sits at the table. And as the hours slip away, the pressure mounts not just on politicians but on the very system itself, because the government is not an abstract machine. It is millions of workers, countless services, contracts, protections, and programs that keep the country running, and every ticking second brings a machinery closer to a false halt. Like a massive engine sputtering as the fuel runs out, and the silence that follows could be deafening, and yet here we are, suspended in this moment of uncertainty, the public waiting, the media spinning, the markets trembling, the world watching, and through it all one statement continues to define the narrative. We're headed to a shutdown, a phrase that has become less of a prediction and more of a verdict, and still, questions remain unanswered, motives remain hidden, and the full story has yet to be revealed, because beneath the headlines and speeches there are deeper currents, secret negotiations, rivalries, ambitions, and fears that the public does not yet see, and the next revelation could change everything, could tilt the balance toward confrontation or compromise, could expose hidden strategies or backroom deals. But for now, the only certainty is uncertainty, the only clarity is tension, and the only direction seems to be forward into the unknown, as the nation braces for impact and wonders who, if anyone, will pull the brake before it's too late. And as the silence before impact grows unbearable, the nation watches leaders circle each other in a dance of defiance and desperation, the countdown ticking louder with every hour. And what makes this moment so gripping is not just mechanics of government or the technicalities of budgets, but the raw human drama of power, pride, and the refusal to blink first. Because when stakes are this high, every gesture, every statement, every pause is magnified into a signal of resolve or weakness, and the whole country reads between the lines, interpreting glances, body language, even the timing of press conferences as though decoding a thriller in real time. And yet behind all this choreography there's an undeniable truth emerging, that the shutdown Vance warned about is no longer a distant possibility but a looming certainty, and the weight of that reality presses down on everyone. From senators making late-night calls to exhausted staffers scribbling notes in the margins of draft deals. From families double-checking their bank accounts to travelers nervously scanning news alerts about potential disruptions, and the rising panic is matched only by the stubbornness of the players involved. For on one side there's a current administration standing firm, declaring that the government must remain open, that stability must be preserved, that the people deserve better than partisan chaos, and on the other side there's the opposition, emboldened by Trump's influence and Vance's, warning, framing the shutdown not as a failure but as a stand, a battle worth fighting even if the costs are high. And caught in the middle is the American people, ordinary men and women who did not ask for this spectacle yet must bear its consequences, and it is in their faces, worried, weary, waiting, that the true impact of this political brinkmanship is revealed, because while the leaders strategize, the people suffer, and still no one flinches, no one moves to stop the collision, until, finally, almost like a crack in a dam, the moment of impact arrives, the deadline passes, the government shutters its doors, and the shutdown becomes reality. And in that instant the tension that has been building for weeks releases into chaos, with federal workers sent home or ordered to work without pay, with markets plunging, with headlines screaming, with the world staring in disbelief that the most powerful nation on earth could stumble so willingly into paralysis, and yet here it is, not a theoretical warning, but a lived nightmare. The lights dimmed, the gears grinding to a halt, and the sound of silence replacing the hum of normal governance. And what follows is not calm but anger. Protests erupting outside federal buildings, unions demanding action, ordinary Americans flooding social media with stories of unpaid bills, canceled trips, disrupted lives, and the fury is matched only by confusion, because each side blames the other, each side claims a moral high ground, and the people are left caught in a fog of accusation and counter-accusation, trying to discern the truth in a storm of rhetoric. And the longer the shutdown stretches, the deeper the wounds become, seeping into every corner of society, and the narrative shift from blame to consequence, from politics to survival, as families line up at food banks, as veterans wait for delayed benefits, as businesses stall without contracts, and the cost of power game becomes painfully human. And yet even in this darkness there is something undeniable taking shape, a moment of clarity, because what Vance said, what seemed like a distant forecast, has now materialized, and with it comes a stark realization that warnings ignored can become destinies fulfilled, that when leaders choose conflict over compromise, the people pay the price. And as cameras capture the growing unrest, as chants rise outside the Capitol, as the world asks how long this can last, a new layer of drama emerges, because the Shutdown itself is no longer just a crisis. It is a test of endurance, a test of political survival, a test of whether anyone still remembers why they were sent to govern in the first place. And in that test lies the future not only of the shutdown but of the country's direction, because this moment, this struggle, this collision will be remembered long after the doors reopen and the paychecks resume, remembered as a symbol of division, of recklessness, and perhaps of awakening. And the cinematic weight of that realization settles on the shoulders of everyone watching, forcing a question that cuts deeper than politics. How much dysfunction can a democracy survive? How much strain can a system take before the cracks widen beyond repair? And as those questions hang heavy, the camera of history zooms in not on the polished speeches or the staged meetings, but on the ordinary faces of those carrying the burden. The mother counting change at the grocery store, the veteran waiting for care, the worker checking a bank balance that won't stretch another week. And it is in those faces that the true story of this shutdown is written, not in budgets or negotiations, but in human costs. And so as a nation stands still, as a world holds its breath, as the leaders double down on their lines in the sand, the final image is not of triumph or resolution, but of a country caught in its own contradictions, powerful yet paralyzed, determined yet divided, and the echo of Vance's words, still lingering like a haunting refrain. We're headed to a shutdown, and now, with a government dark and the people restless, that warning had become prophecy fulfilled, a prophecy that demands not just blame but reckoning, not just survival but reflection. And the cinematic curtain falls on a moment of profound uncertainty, leaving every viewer with the same chilling thought. If this is what leaders allow to happen now, what storms might still be waiting just beyond the horizon?